going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode of Greyman Operations. In this video, we are going to review the Akra Origin closed emitter red dot optic. Now, I have to be honest, when the guys at Akra reached out to me and asked if I wanted to have a look at their new optic, I had never heard of the company. But I was pleased to find out that Akra is actually a South African company. When I found that they did a red dot, I obviously asked some questions, and the reality is it is a made in China and spec'd in South Africa red dot, as pretty much everything is electronically around the world. I spoke to the guys at Akra and they said basically what happens is they decide on what the specifications of the red dot are, and they get the Chinese to build it so that it is a more cost efficient option. Now, obviously, being the first red dot ever from South Africa, I was going to review it as if it was the first red dot I ever got. And those of you who follow the channel will know that I am, in fact, South African. And I have to be honest, I actually do feel a degree of wanting this red dot to succeed because I am South African, which is often what I think a lot of the American guys do with American-made gear. And I totally get it. Okay, those of you who follow the channel will know that next week I'm giving away a brand new one of these closed emitter red dots to one of my patrons. So if you want to get in on that and join on Patreon, it's the first link in the video description below if you're watching on YouTube. And the link is the first comment if you're watching on Facebook or Instagram. Let's get into the specifics. The Akra Origin red dot has a 16 by 16 millimeter window. Now, it is the closed emitter optic. We will talk about that in a second. The dot is your standard 3 MOA. You have 8 daytime brightness settings and 2 night vision settings. It takes a CR2032 battery that is not included in the packaging, and it's got a quoted 50,000 hours of runtime. Now, the housing itself is fog proof. It's basically nitrogen purged. It's IP67 waterproof rated, and it has a 1000 G impact rating. That's what it says on the box, and we will definitely put it to the test. Now, the first thing I did also, it is motion activated. It's got like a 5-minute auto shut off, and then it's motion activated, which does help with battery a lot. The first thing I did with this optic is I wanted to see how good the emitter is, because it's easy to build a box. It's not so easy to build an emitter. And the way I tested that was with target transitioning from left to right. And what I didn't want to see was flicker. If you can imagine what a red dot is, it's basically a beam of light being pulsed onto a glass. The pulse is so fast that it seems like one constant light, but we all know light is not constant if it is artificial. Now, older red dots had that pulse not quickly enough, so when you transition from left to right or right to left laterally, you would see the dot flicker. I'm happy to say that this does not happen with the Origin red dot. It looks like, and what it should look like is if you get a high quality laser pointer and you draw circles on the wall, it should look as if it becomes like a solid circle. That's what you get. When I transition laterally, I want to be able to track that dot almost as if it was drawing a line in space that immediately disappears as soon as it gets past that point in space. So the emitter on the Akra does exactly what I want it to do. The next thing I looked at was its low light capability. Now, backlit low light is the nemesis of pretty much any optic. However, on its brightest setting, which is what I've been running it on as standard, I found that the Akra is more than sufficient when I'm running it with the X300 and the target is lit up at the point where the round would impact. What I'm looking for on a red dot is when I switch the dot on, the weapon light on, does the dot wash out if I'm not pointing it at a white background? Unfortunately, if it's at a clear white background, it is going to wash out a little. Okay, so as long as your bad guy isn't wearing a white t-shirt, you're probably good to go. But in reality, the further away you get from the target, the less it's going to wash out, because the less bounce back you're going to get from your weapon mounted light. Obviously, depending on lumen output, etc., etc. I did most of my testing in low light. with the Surefire X300. And like I said, I didn't have an issue. Now guys, a closed emitter optic is basically a normal optic inside of a box. There are 3 panes of glass here, if you will. You've got the rear glass, the front glass, and then the sealed optic window that is inside the box. Generally the rear and front glasses are sort of sacrificial. If something is going to break and those break, your optic probably will still run. Obviously it won't be as sealed and fog proof anymore because you now have a box with a hole in it. But these are generally sacrificial lenses, and it's what makes a closed emitter optic the ideal optic for those of you who maybe are in law enforcement, where you do open carry, where you are more likely to get bumps and knocks, etc., etc. That does bring us on to drop and impact testing. So racking the firearm off the optic was done quite a few times. I have had no issue with it. The zero was maintained and there was no problems. When it came to drop tests, when something says it is 1000 G impact rated, you best believe I'm going to drop it. I did 3 drop tests with the Origin, and I can tell you from the first one, I knew this wasn't going to break. It didn't sound like it was going to break, and I was dropping it on concrete. The sound the Origin makes when you drop it is a non-hollow sound. It's a dense sound. I know that's not scientific, but you know, sometimes you drop something and you're like, man, that thing didn't even make like a hollowy sound. It sounded like I dropped a stone. That's what I was hearing with the Origin. And of course, zero was maintained. At the end of this video, I will show you my final 3 shots that I shot today with the Origin optic. I zeroed it once using the Strikeman laser target system at 10 meters, and I have not touched the dials since. Now guys, I do want to talk about the size of the window. The window of this optic will seem smaller because you are looking at it through a tunnel basically, but it's about the exact same size as the daddy of closed emitter optics, which is the Aimpoint Akra. And I actually think it could be a little bit bigger than your Holosun. Well, maybe the same size, a little bit bigger, I'm not sure. Maybe the Holosun's a bit bigger, but it's not much bigger than your Holosun 507 series, which is the most commonly used Holosun over the past few years. I know they are getting a bit dated now, but there's probably more 507s rolling around out there than many of the others. So don't be confused or discouraged by the fact that the window looks small. It only looks that way because there's a lot of material around it, which I'm assuming is there for that 1000 G impact rating. Now, before we get to whether this is value for money or not, let's talk about what you get in the box. When you buy one of these optics, you will get a box, microfiber cloth, Picatinny AR riser mount, RMR mounting plate, an assortment of mounting screws, 2 Allen wrenches for mounting and zeroing, the Akra Origin closed emitter red dot, and an MOS mounting plate. Now guys, to be brutally honest, that is a lot of gear for around 4,500 Rand. If you want to know what 4,500 Rand, it's between 4,000 and 5,000 Rand. If you're international, that's $250. That's really good value for money. When I bought my Akra, I had to buy the mounting plate separate, and it cost me about $1,000. Okay, so if you ask me, when it comes to value for money, that is absolute insanity, and that is where I do agree with if you can control the quality, have it made in China, because you're probably going to be able to get it for cheaper. Just don't put a gazillion Rand or dollar markup on it, and you'll present a really good product at a really good price. Now guys, I can't predict what this dot's going to be like in 5 or 10 years time. The only thing I can do is do a lot more shooting than the average person would do, in my opinion, in the time that I've had it. I have put a lot of rounds through this. I've been testing multiple things on my Glock, and this red dot has been on my Glock, and it's not faulted at all. So I can't see into the future. I can't tell what this is going to be like in 5 years time, but right now, based on what I have, I think it's a really good dot. Also, just a note, the battery is side mounted, and your brightness buttons, they are on the side that if you are right-handed faces your body, so there's no chance of anything knocking against the buttons to basically change your brightness setting. These are the final shots I fired today with the Akra Origin. As far as I'm concerned, that is zero maintained through the entirety. And what's more impressive is the mounting plate, the screws, and the dot itself never came loose. I haven't used any Loctite. I know I should, but I switch optics a lot. I would recommend, if you do get this, or if you get any optic and it's the only optic you can run, Loctite that sucker down, because you don't want it coming loose at a later stage. You know, like I said, I can't tell you what this is going to be like in 5 years' time. I can only test it in the period that is reasonable, because I'm sure the guys at Akra would be quite annoyed if they send me this optic and I say, yeah, your review will be out in about 5 years' time. Okay, so I've got to mitigate that by running a lot of rounds. Guys, for the money, I think it is an excellent option. You're going to struggle to find anything that is this good at this price. As you can see, I've not hidden the fact that I've tested. The gravity for me works the same as the gravity for you, I hope. So when I dropped it 3 times, I really dropped it 3 times. The rounds I fired are really the rounds I fired, and I haven't re-zeroed this at all. So with that said, I very rarely recommend things, but as a South African, I'm going to go out on the limb here and say I'm comfortable recommending this red dot, because I feel I've done it due diligence with the amount of testing I've put it through. Guys, remember, next week on the channel, I am giving one of these suckers away. So join up on Patreon if you want to win, stand a chance to win. A huge thanks to the guys at Akra Tobias there, who I've been speaking to quite often. There are more reviews of their red dots coming out. I've got one of their open emitter red dots as well, so we're definitely going to be taking a look at that. That's it, guys. If you want to see more of this kind of thing, please consider subscribing. I do this every single weekend. That's it, guys. Have a good week. Be safe. Train hard. Cheers. God bless.